This video will guide you on how to analyze a dataset with an ANOVA, which takes upon the two-way mixed model design. Our dataset comes from this research question, where someone was interested in investigating text messaging on children's grammatical ability. There was a total of 50 children in the experiment, where 25 were encouraged to send text messages and 25 were forbidden to send text messages over a 6-month period. Grammatical ability was measured both before and after the experiment. So, what are the main effects that we'll be looking at with this example? Remember that main effects examine one factor at a time. So we have two factors. The first main effect will be looking at overall means of grammatical ability for group while ignoring time. This means that the ANOVA will compare the means of grammatical ability of children in the control group versus the children in the text messaging group. The second main effect will examine time. So the ANOVA will compare the means of grammatical ability of all participants before the experiment and after the experiment. This means it'll ignore whether children are in the control group or the text messenger group. Furthermore, the ANOVA will also examine the interaction between the two factors. More specifically, it'll look at the interaction between group and time and examine whether the effect of time on grammatical ability depends upon which group children were in. But before we go into analysing the data, we need to check our assumptions. Our first two assumptions are methodological, but we can use SPSS to check the assumptions of these variables here. Homogeneity of variance and sphericity can be checked whilst running the ANOVA. So we're just going to jump into SPSS and start off by checking our normality assumption. If you don't already have this file open up the data file related to this activity. To check for normality, we go into Analyze, Descriptive Statistics, and Explore. We want to put our dependent variable into the dependent list box. What we're interested in is measuring grammatical ability and how it differs over time and across groups. This makes grammatical ability before and after our dependent variable. So let's transfer these two variables into our dependent list box, and we're going to move our group variable into our factors list box. You all should know the drill by now. So let's click on plots, and in order to tell SPSS that we want normality tests, we're going to place a tick next to normality plots with test, and with visual inspection we can use histograms. So let's place a tick next to histograms. Let's now click continue and OK. So now we've tested for our normality assumption. We'll go through this later. We can now analyze our dataset using an ANOVA and test for homogeneity of variance and sphericity at the same time. So let's jump back into SPSS. To run our ANOVA, we're going to go into Analyze, General Linear Model, and Repeated Measures. A Define Factors window will appear. We need to tell SPSS about our within subjects factor. This is our time variable. So let's type in time in our factor name box. And now we're going to type in 2 into number of levels because that indicates how many levels are within this variable. Grammatical ability was measured before and after, so that's 2 levels. Let's click Add. In the bottom half of the window, we can tell SPSS what our dependent variable is. So let's type in grammatical ability. And we're going to use an underscore because SPSS does not like spaces. And we're going to hit Add. Now we can move on to the next step. So let's press Define. In this window, we can tell SPSS about our within subjects factor as well as our between subjects factor. So we need to transfer our before and after variables into the within subjects variables box. So let's click before and transfer it over, and same thing with after. Now we tell SPSS that we have a between subjects factor, which is our grouping variable. So let's transfer our group variable into the between subjects factors box. There are a number of things we need to get SPSS to provide us before we run our analysis. The first thing is plots. It's always great to have a visual graph of our data to help us interpret interactions more clearly. To do this, let's go into plots and let's generate one graph for each main effect. So let's start off by creating a graph for main effect of group. So we click on group and transfer this variable into the horizontal axis box and click add. Let's do the same thing so we get a plot for the main effect of time. So let's click on time and transfer this into horizontal axis and click add. Now let's graph the interaction between group and time. We need to put one variable into the horizontal axis box and the other in the separate lines box. So which way should we put our variables? Well, a good rule of thumb is that whenever you have a time variable, this should go into the horizontal axis box. So let's transfer time into horizontal axis and transfer group into separate lines box. And now click add. So we're done. This will generate graphs for two main effects and an interaction effect. Let's now press continue. We now need to tell SPSS what options we want to use when running this analysis. So let's click on options, and this window will allow us to generate estimated marginal means tables and graphs. So let's select all three of our factors. So click on group, hold down shift on your keyboard and click group by time and transfer all three factors at once into the display means for box. Now within our display section, we can place a tick next to descriptive statistics for a table of mean and standard deviation scores as a function of both group and time. And let's place a tick next to estimates of effect size. So we get eta squared, and finally our homogeneity of variance tests. This will test our assumption for homogeneity of variance. Let's click continue. We would normally go ahead with the ANOVA, but remember, if we get a significant interaction effect, we need to come back into this and set up the simple effects analysis. Since we already know that the interaction will be significant, we might as well set up the simple effects analysis now. In order to run a simple effects analysis, we need to go through using syntax. So instead of pressing OK to run our ANOVA, we press the paste button. This will paste the analysis information into a new syntax file, and we need to locate EMM means tables bracket group by time, so this line here. Once we've located this line here, what we need to type in is this command here. So compare group with adjusted alpha levels using Bonferroni. So let's jump back into SPSS and do this. Okay, so we're back into our repeated measures window, and instead of clicking OK, we're going to click paste. Let's locate the line EMM means table bracket group by time. This should be located on line 10 over here. And what we're going to do is add in this final command, compare bracket group bracket space adjusted and bracket Bonferroni. So you're able to select Bonferroni here because SPSS gives you that option. Just remember to close your bracket. When you've done that, you want to locate the button with the green arrow up top here, and we're going to click it. So we've now just done a normality assumption test and ran an ANOVA with simple effects analysis. I'd recommend that you save your output file, as this concludes the data analysis video for a two-way mixed model ANOVA.